So today we're talking about the new era of Bodyguard rules in Warhammer 40k, and why I think that Games Workshop could do with fixing them. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today I just wanted to mention something that's been bugging me a fair bit, just a minor issue with the character targeting rules, which I believe will make a positive change to 9th edition if Games Workshop did reword them a little. For the most part I think the rule is functional and works quite well, but it seems to be a growing trend in tournaments that the Bodyguard rules are really quite used and abused, and create a few slightly silly situations where you can't shoot certain characters off objectives, or cases where you have big gun platforms that can just shoot you for no penalty while not being shot themselves. I know 9th edition has many issues, and maybe this is far from the biggest, but I would argue that it's perhaps a small case of a slightly broken rule. So these Bodyguard type rules that I'm talking about appear on certain units' datasheets, things like the Space Marine Command Squad, Necron Lich Guard, Death Shroud Terminators, and the Drakari Court of the Archon, and maybe most relevantly recently, Celestian Sacrosancts. These units are all basically retinues, designed to keep the characters that they're protecting safe, and they all have a rule that's worded in a fairly similar way. When a friendly character that's got less than 9 wounds is within 3 inches of them, it just straight up can't be targeted by ranged weapons. It's really quite a blanket and powerful rule to try and make these bodyguards relevant. In 8th edition they had all sorts of minor variants, say taking the hit themselves and the roll of a 2+, or various other things. In 9th edition, now there's not even any chance of even trying to snipe out the character with sniper weapons at all, you just straight up can't target them whatsoever. It doesn't matter if the character is closer to your guns than the bodyguard unit, which I think might be the intention really. It allows characters to lead from the front somewhat, and it can look quite nice and cinematic on the table. However, I do think that the rule is maybe just a little bit simplistic, and does lead to some fairly silly situations when you combine it with line of sight blocking ruins. Just as one example, here we have a Space Marine Hellblaster trying to take aim at some Sisters of Battle. We have Morven Val in her Paragon Warsuit at the front, then a line of sight blocking ruin in the middle, and the other side of that line of sight blocking ruin we have a Celestian Sacrosanct unit that the Space Marine Hellblaster can't even see. Morven Val is less than 8 wounds, and also within 3 inches of the bodyguards. It means that she can't be targeted by ranged weapons, even though the Hellblaster can literally see her and nothing else whatsoever. It leads to a pretty weird situation where Val can shoot the Hellblaster, but the Hellblaster cannot shoot Val, unless you manage to do something about the really quite tough Celestian Sacrosanct unit behind, such as flanking them and taking them out with another unit. You can use the bodyguard ability like this to claim objectives. Say if you had a line of sight blocking ruin somewhat near a home field objective, you might be able to park Morven Val with her decent sized base just within scoring range of the objective, and it basically means that if you're playing an army that relies on the shooting phase, again unless you can flank and kill those Sacrosancts, there's literally no way you can shoot your opponent off this objective. It's really quite a powerful play, in addition that's all about surviving on primary objectives each turn and stopping yourself being killed off them. Arguably though, it perhaps gets silliest whenever the character has fairly decent firepower. Here we have 2 Ravenwing Talon Masters that are just towing in to within 3 inches of the Deathwing Terminator Command Squad, that of course is safely parked behind this ruin. It means that again both of them are completely untargetable, and it means that each turn they can hand out 36 relatively high quality anti-infantry shots, and again unless you can get something in close combat with them, you're not going to be able to do anything about them at all. I think for the most part Games Workshop does try and limit characters with really heavy firepower. The Talon Masters could just be hovering equally behind a Dark Angel's battle line and put some really tough Terminators in the way, still being very powerful and hard to target, but at least in that way you could theoretically fire enough shots to destroy the entire Terminator units. And again with this formation, unless you can kill those incredibly tough Deathwing Terminators out of line of sight, you can't do anything at all about this little formation. Finally, for cheesy examples, and maybe taking it to its extreme, Saint Celestine is perhaps one of the biggest defenders of this rule. With her Gemini, she's a multi-model character unit. The unit still gets protection if they're within 3 inches of the Sacrosancts that are hiding out of sight, but then they can chain out maximally to have 2 inches between each model, meaning that the whole formation can stretch really quite a long way to reach an objective or to get closer charge range on the enemy, again having no way whatsoever that the opponent can target them. The Top Sisters players really do seem to be abusing this quite a lot. It seems at least a relatively common manoeuvre to expose literally nothing turn 1 but characters, and have them all protected in this way, sort of double dipping on getting the forward movement on them, and chaining out to reach objectives, while not having to worry about anything like a pesky shooting phase. I'm totally not saying that there's anything wrong with doing so at a competitive tournament, but I do think it might be a sensible move on Games Workshop's part to update these rules a bit. But just for the sake of game immersion, it just doesn't really make much logical sense to me. If you've got a unit of bodyguards shielding the characters from harm, the bodyguards do actually need to be in harm's way, otherwise how are they supposed to protect the characters from incoming fire? It is just a bit of a silly situation if you have a gunnery commander saying, "Oh no, don't target that character. There may or may not be a bodyguard unit hiding behind that building we can't see." So how might Games Workshop choose to fix bodyguard rules if of course they do choose to do that? I was having a think of a fair few different options, and I think it at least is maybe a slight challenge to still keep them relevant, while not allowing the situation of exposing characters while hiding the bodyguards. You could maybe make it so the bodyguard unit must also be visible to the shooting unit, though I believe that could potentially lead to some strange situations with using your own units or terrain to try and limit your own line of sight, ideally so you could see the character but not the bodyguards. I seem to remember that happening in early 8th. You could maybe say that the rule can only take effect if the bodyguard unit is closer to the shooting unit, or maybe say that it doesn't apply if the character is the closest visible enemy model. However, I think that's a bit sad that you can't allow your character to lead from the front and still be protected, and sometimes you might still have the same issue. You could have a unit of bodyguards that were hidden, then maybe a couple of Ravenwing Talonmasters poking out the side of the ruin, still able to fire while being protected, and still not the closest unit to the enemy. You could maybe say that you need a line of sight between both the character and the bodyguard unit, and I guess that might limit at least some of the worst cases, but still could be an issue with things like obscuring ruins with windows. I'm sure people down in the comments will have plenty of other ideas, but I thought that perhaps the simplest solution would be that if you're able to target the character with shots, then they'd hit the bodyguard unit instead of the character, forcing the bodyguards to actually tank the damage rather than hiding out of line of sight and being invincible. It's not like you'd freely be able to target the character with literally everything anyway, they still have character protection after all. But at least it would stop the silly situation of your character being the closest visible model to the enemy unit, but still not being able to target them because of reasons. I think furthermore, for units like St. Celestine, it might be a bit more sensible to have multi-character units all have to be within 3-inch range to benefit from the bodyguard rule, as chaining them out for really quite big distances does seem a bit daft, and to still allow them to get character protection, even if they can't do gamey chaining maneuvers to get over to objectives that are a long way away from them. So anyway, let me know what you think of the strange bodyguard rules issues. Do you think that it's something that Games Workshop should fix, or does it work fine as it is? Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.